Okay, good evening, everybody. We'll make a start. So, firstly, to thank you to Gillian and David for hosting us, and to all the other the hosts those who've hosted the other two in this series and the speakers as well. I hope those who've been to others have enjoyed them. Anyone been to any of the other sessions? Yeah. Excellent. Okay, good. Okay. All right. So you'll be disappointed with this session then. Well, never mind. You can't have it all. But the desserts are still good. You can say whatever you like. You can say whatever you like. It can be edited out afterwards. Don't worry. It's all going to look good. It's all going to be good. Okay. So this is this time.
Do that in Shiur on Shabbos and no one will talk.
Or pre-record it.
Because we're being recorded.
Yes.
Could you imagine no one talk? I didn't know people did talk in Shiur. I've never noticed. Anyway, so this time next week will be Purim, please God. Okay, and then in 4 weeks will be Pesach. That would be good news. But it will be whatever I say. It will be anyway. So regardless. So I wanted to start. I know Pesach is all about questions. So I want to start this evening with one question. I want to implant a question in your mind for you to think about throughout the Shiur and while you're eating dessert as well. And then hopefully we'll come back to it. And hopefully throughout the Shiur we'll hopefully find an answer to it. And the question is this. It's a bit of a strange question, but here it is. The question is this: which is the more mature, Pesach or Purim? Purim or Pesach? You're looking at me quizzically. What do I mean? What is the more mature? If Pesach and Purim were the names of your children, which one of them would you say is more grown up? Pesach?
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
Well, it's from a name. And
It's from a name.
and Purim is like a fun name, so you think of it to be a younger child.
Right, okay. And what about their personalities? Let's go beyond their names. Let's go in terms of their personalities. In terms of, and let's move away from. I think that's a bad analogy, actually. In terms of as a festival, which one do you think is a more mature, more grown-up festival, Purim or Pesach? Pesach. Why?
Drinking and
Right. Okay. So Purim. Yeah, it seems more serious. Yes. Let's take it one at a time. So let's take Purim. So Purim. Let's try and think of it. What's associated with Purim? Purim is associated with drinking, dressing up, making noise. Ensure it's permitted to make noise, obviously. This idea of everything being turned upside down. I mean, that's similar to Pesach, really. Everything being turned upside down, but in a different way. We say Ad Yodada. You're meant to eat until you don't know the difference between the blessing of Mordechai and the curse of Haman. Got that right? Yeah, got that right. And the name itself, Purim, is called Al Shem HaPur. On account of the fact that the reason Haman chose this date, the 14th of Adar, is because he did a lottery. He took a lottery. It's by chance. It's a purely chance. There's a lot of things going on, right? But it's a fun, relaxed, informal messing about. Okay?
Well, if you want to use your analogy of naming children, I know you're very particular about names when it comes to ketubot and making sure they are proper names.
Yes.
But Pesach is a proper name for a child.
Right.
Whether Purim would be a proper name for a child in Jewish law, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone ever called their children Purim.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
But
maybe for good reason. Right, exactly. Maybe for good reason.
So there is an element of some sort of
100%. I mean, that's reflected in it. So let's take Pesach then, in terms of its seriousness. Obviously, the preparation, a lot of cleaning. We have to make sure we remove chometz. We know chometz is it's serious, right? It's an isukares. A person who eats chometz on Pesach faces a very serious consequence. There's a mitzvah to eat matzah, to drink the 4 cups, have a seder. The very definition of a seder is it follows an order. It's not a free-for-all like Purim is, right? It has to follow a very set order. We deal with some very important themes, the idea of slavery to freedom. We talk about the Korban Pesach, the requirement to bring the sacrificial offering. We talk about the makos, the plagues, the nisim, all the miracles, the Yad Hashem, seeing God's hand. And it is, very fascinatingly, Pesach is the most celebrated chag out of all the chagim, even amongst non-religious Jews in Israel as well. It is the most celebrated. So there's something about Pesach which is very serious, very mature, very important, right? Whereas different. We're not comparing the two things, right? We're comparing Pesach and Purim. Okay, that's another Shiur. Okay, and in fact, interestingly, I'll just mention it here. But actually, there are those who say that Purim, that Yom Kippur is Yom Kippurim, right? Where everything is turned upside down. Yeah, but that's a whole other subject. But if we're doing a compare and contrast between Purim and Pesach, we all agree, right? Purim is the immature child, and Pesach is the very mature, sensible, serious one. Yes. And so too with the Chagim. Okay, good. Okay, so it has to be Pesach. And again, one more reason why it has to be Pesach, because if you look at it in terms of where we have the sources for Purim and Pesach, Purim is a rabbinically instituted festival, whereas Pesach is Min HaTorah. The Torah says, and everything the Torah says is about Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. Everything is about remembering going out of Egypt, not just Pesach, but Pesach is the main focus of it. Okay, so we've agreed that Pesach is the serious one, Purim is the fun one. Let's see if that's actually true. I want you to keep that question in your mind and see if we'll revisit it at the end of the shiur. I'd just like to take one and pass along, please. Okay, just to be conventional, we're going to start with source number 1. And this is a source in Shulchan Aruch. This is halakha. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Hakores Megillah lemafreh. This is a halakha in relation to how you read the Megillah. So even though Purim is a fun festival, we still have rules, right? Because rules make it fun, right? Hakores Megillah lemafreh. Says the Shulchan Aruch, if a person reads the Megillah lemafreh, which here has been translated as incorrectly, but that's probably actually an incorrect translation. Lemafreh actually sometimes means retroactively, in the wrong order. Okay, and we'll see how we know that. Lo yatsa, you haven't fulfilled your obligation. Kara pasuk echad v'dilag hasheni v'kara shlishi. And what is the example of reading it in the wrong order? Person reads one verse, skips the next one, and reads the third one. So they've obviously been drinking before they read the Megillah. What happens? There's a geshrei and shul, people call out, right? What's happened? They missed the verse. We'll see that they go back and they read the second verse. Again, lo yatsa. They would not have fulfilled the obligation. Why? Because they read 1, 3, 2 in the wrong order. Onto the second line. Why is they've not fulfilled their obligation? Because they've read one verse in the wrong order. So what should they do to correct the mistake? What they should do is they should start again with the verse they forgot, which was verse number 2, and then carry on reading from where they were. Okay? I'm not sure if this ever happened, but this is an important halakha to know. But what is fascinating about this halakha is to understand, why does the Shulchan Aruch have to tell us this? And look at source number 2. We're going to see sources 2, 3, and 4 are commentaries on this. First is the Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim's commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. He says, Lemafreya. What does it mean, Lemafreya? Out of order, incorrect. There's no English translation. I'm sorry, I'll just translate it. He says, what does that mean? What does it Mafreya mean? Where you read later verses before earlier verses. Okay, as we explained. And even if only one verse is in the wrong order, it's still you're not fulfilled the obligation. And not just with verses, but even with the chapters. You skipped a chapter, and it can easily happen with the Megillah. I mentioned the other day, the Megillah is something you normally kept rolled up the whole year, and then the person reading it is meant to fold it like a letter, and it's all your fingers and thumbs, right, to try and make sure it stays in place, right? You're holding it down with everything, and it's quite easy to flip it over and actually miss not just one chapter, but many chapters, and you end up reading it in the wrong order, right? That you can't do. You will not have fulfilled your obligation if you read even one verse in the wrong order, and also any chapter in the wrong order. Let's look at source number 3, the Bir Halacha, another commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. So if a person reads it in the wrong order, they've not fulfilled the obligation. Says Bir Halacha something really interesting. He says, not only do you have to go back and read it in the correct order, but quite possibly you have to make a new bracha. You have to start all over again and make a new bracha. Why? Since it's as if when you made the bracha initially, it was as if you didn't start reading from the beginning of the Megillah at that moment. And therefore you have nullified your bracha. Like any other time when you make an interruption between making a bracha and fulfilling the mitzvah. With any other thing else, you're meant to do the bracha over the siyatan immediately before you fulfill the mitzvah. If there's an interruption, an unnecessary interruption between bracha and mitzvah, you'd have to repeat the bracha. So the Be'er Halacha says something interesting. He says, even if you skip even one verse and say it in the wrong order, and once you realize your mistake, you start again, it would appear you might have to say the bracha again. So really, really important here. And then let's look at the source number 4, the Kaf HaChaim, another commentary. If a person reads the Megillah in the wrong order, they have not fulfilled the obligation. Why? Because they've not read the remembrance of the memorial, the reminder of the miracle, how it happened. Ukasiv niskarim v'naasim, as we say in the Megillah, niskarim, these days are remembered and done. Hukish zechira la'asiyah, we make a hekesh, we make a connection between remembering and doing. Ma'asiyah lemafre I eshelasos, just as it's impossible to do the things out of order, for the things that happened to happen out of sequence. For example, you can't have the day 15 before day 14. Day 14 always comes before day 15. So too, so reading the events out of order, also you will not fulfill your obligation. Okay, so are we clear from all these sources what you can't do? You cannot read the Megillah in the wrong order. It just can't happen. Okay, that's one halacha. I want to learn one more halacha with you, and then we'll move on. Look at source number 5. Source number 5, another halacha. Few halachas later, 6 halachas later, says the Shulchan Aruch, Kara misnamneim. The person reading the Megillah, he's had a busy day. He's been fasting, he's tired. As he's reading the Megillah, he starts to doze off. Okay? Obviously, they're not banging on, not making enough noise in shul to wake him up. Maybe that's what it was for. As long as they haven't actually fallen asleep, they fulfilled their obligation. And the people listening would have fulfilled their obligation. Okay? So a little doze off, you're okay.
Assuming he hasn't missed a verse.
100%, yeah, absolutely, yes. And maybe that's what's happened while he fell asleep. But as long as he hasn't missed it, he hasn't skipped it, he's okay. Aval im shama misnam name lo yatsa. However, the person listening, if they even just doze off, not fall asleep, but doze off, they've not fulfilled the obligation. Why? Because we know you have to hear every single word of the Megillah. You have to hear it. Okay. Now we're confident that the person reading it, he'll be awake enough that he'll be saying all the words, and if he doesn't, obviously people will be correcting him. But the people listening, there's no one to correct the people listening. There's no one to make sure the person listening who's dozed off has heard every single word. And therefore, you cannot fulfill your obligation if you doze off during the listening.
If you're reading it to yourself,
yep.
lightly, the words, and you doze off, you're listening in
yep.
school, but
yep.
you're following the words
yep.
in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Have you heard every single word?
Well, you have until you doze off.
Well, that's great. Yeah.
But you're saying it yourself, I mean,
Yeah, but you don't fulfill your obligation by saying it yourself. You only fulfill the mitzvah by hearing from someone reading it from a Megillah, from a kosher Megillah. Yeah. In fact, you shouldn't read it for yourself. You should follow to keep you awake. Right. That's the whole purpose of reading it, to keep you awake. Yeah. But you should listen to what the person's saying. You have to hear it from the person reading it from a kosher Megillah.
Sometimes, like, there have been people before that it's been so fast, and I read fast, and I'm lost. I'm lost
right.
from with the. No, but then you're stuck because you actually can't even hear the words. You're unsure. You don't know where the heck you are because you can't even find out where they're up to.
Mm-hmm.
So you're hearing, but you don't know what they're saying. You can't follow, which sort of.
It's a good point. It's a good point. The halakha does deal with it. It says even if the person doesn't understand what's being said at all, right. It's listening. It's the hearing the Megillah. That's all. That's the mitzvah.
You don't hear. You're not really hearing it.
You're only hearing a blur, aren't you?
You're hearing a blur. You can't hear. There's some people when they read, it's really easy to follow, and you stay the whole time. And other people, you're just you're lost from the beginning.
Right.
You're like, well,
but even though you're hearing it, you're not understanding it.
You don't have to understand it. Yeah. You don't have to understand it.
There's
no requirement to understand it. You're right, it's not correct. The person should read it slowly enough that people should be able to hear every single word distinctly, and they should be able to follow. I'm sure JJ does it perfectly. I'm sure he does.
Not JJ.
No, Chas v'shalom.
Not JJ.
I'm sure.
You're right. The person reading it should make sure they're reading it slow enough people can follow and hear every single word distinctly. But there are. I remember when I was growing up, there was a guy who used to lane every week. I've never heard of someone lane as fast and as accurately as him. You could hear every single word. It was very, very fast. Yes, it was a struggle to keep up, to follow. But as long as you're listening, that's fine. Yeah. It's absolutely fine.
Just that you get lost at the beginning. You're like, well, lost.
Yeah. Just listen. Yeah. As long as you're listening, you're fine. Yeah. You're good. Don't fall asleep. That's the most important thing. That's they was going to say two things.
How can you fall asleep with all the noise?
Well, yes. Okay. Okay. So we see two interesting halachas. Yeah. The first one I think is a fascinating halakha. You cannot read it out of order, and the second one is you cannot fall asleep while you're listening to it. Right. Now, can you tell me any other mitzvah?
Is there anything else, anywhere else you have this?
Right. And then the other mitzvah where you're told you have to do it in the right order. Apart from Seder night, yeah, sorry, yeah. Apart from the Seder night, yeah. No, but when it comes to reading something, what about Kriyas Torah on a Shabbos morning?
We're not told specifically what to read. Well, okay, we read it. We split it.
Yeah, we have
but
yeah.
You don't. No, you're not told what to read.
This halakha is not mentioned in relation to any other type of reading, not Kriyas Torah. What about the Haggadah? Anyone start at the end of the Haggadah? Yeah, just do the songs, right? Just do the songs. I'm not giving a heter tonight to it. I'm not giving a heter. But there is no halakha that says a person who reads the Haggadah in the wrong order has not fulfilled the obligation. No halakha says that. No halakha says if you read Sheni before Shlishi before Sheni on a Shabbos morning, you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah. We don't do it, and presumably you wouldn't have fulfilled your mitzvah. But I have not seen it in Shulchan Aruch. It's fascinating. Only with Megillah. Now that's what I want to try and understand tonight. I want to look at taking these two halachas, particularly the first one, and try and understand what I call the meta halacha, which is the reason behind this halacha. Why does Jewish law stipulate particularly about Megillah?
Is it only this Megillah or any other Megillah?
That's a good question. Only this Megillah. Yeah, only this Megillah. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, which ramps up the question even more. Why particularly Megillah's Esther is this a requirement?
If I could hazard a guess, I mean, I think the whole story of the miracle of the story of Purim, events happened in a certain order, and if you took them out of order, you wouldn't see the miracle. You would diminish, God forbid, from the size, the importance, the significance of the miracle.
Yeah, brilliant. I think you should come here because
We're done.
yeah, that is it. We're done. That is it. That's it.
But this is the only Megillah where there's a mitzvah to actually read the Megillah from a kosher Megillah. You can read the others without saying a bracha and
there's no actual requirement. Yes.
So there's no. So the requirement is you must do it.
Yeah.
It's absolute requirement. There's not.
True. And but that's the question. Why particularly Megillah's Esther? It has to be read from a kosher Megillah in the way we read it, with all the halachas that go with it, and these ones as well. Yeah, I think both you're touching on something which is really central to what we're going to discover tonight, and then maybe help us answer that question we had at the beginning. Okay, so let's move on. Source number 6. So we're going to try to understand the reasoning behind these halakas, and hope they'll give us an insight into Megillah itself and into something even more than that. So this is a well-known Gemara. Gemara in Chulin asks the famous question: Haman min haTorah minayin. Where do we find Haman mentioned in the Torah? Now, if you want to just get past the bizarre question, which is, why would Haman be mentioned in the Torah? When did Haman live? Yeah, hundreds, if not thousands of years after the Torah was given. Why would you even think Haman's mentioned in the Torah? Okay, so that's an interesting question, but let's go with it for a moment. Yeah, famous answer. The Gemara answers, that's obvious. It's in Bereshis, very early on, chapter 3. Hamin ha'etz. Yeah, when Adam HaRishon and Chava, they eat from the tree and they hide, God says to them, Hamin ha'etz. Did you eat from the tree? Look at the letters. Hey Mem Nun, spell Haman and Hamin. Yeah, it's a lovely little play on words. Yeah, a lovely bit of Purim Torah. Or is it? Yeah, I think rabbis are not better to sit around looking for where you can find Hey Mem Nun in the Torah. I'm sure it happens more other times as well. Yeah? So it's a famous Gemara, but what's the Gemara really coming up? What's its question and what's its answer? For that, we need to look at a few commentaries. Let's look first at the Ben Yehoyada, which is the Ben Ish Chai's 19th century Baghdadi rabbi, famous rabbi. He explains the following. Why does the Gemara ask this question, and why does it answer it in the way it does? Why particularly does it find a source of Haman in the story of Adam HaRishon? So it says the Ben Ish Chai, Haman min haTorah minayin, she'al zeh kedei lahatzil es Mordechai hatzadik mitluna sheyesh litlunim alav. The Gemara asks this question specifically in order to prevent Mordechai from being concerned, from being worried with everything that's going to go on in the story. Lama niskara b'Haman. Why he's going to be troubled by Haman. Ve'vi Yisrael lidei sakana, and he's going to bring the Jewish people into mortal danger. Ulachein shal aremez shemo min haTorah. And therefore the Gemara asks, where can we find a remez? Where can we find an allusion to Haman in the Torah? Why? on the second line, middle of the second line, Kiba Makom Shiramos Shemoy Ramos Sofa Maj Yeloi. Says the Ben Ish Chai, because wherever we find an allusion to a person's name, there we find what's going to happen to them at the end. Yeah, where you find their name is a hint to what's going to happen to them at the end.
And he was hung on the tree.
Oh, exactly right. Where do we find the name Haman? Hamin ha'etz, from the tree. What happened to Haman in the end? He ended up swinging from a tree, hanging from a tree. Third line, Ulachein. Therefore, if you find where Haman's name is mentioned in the Torah, you'll find what will happen to him. And therefore, this will save Mordechai, the righteous one, from any worry. And therefore, the Gemara answers Hamin ha'etz, from the tree. And this therefore saved the Tzaddik, the righteous one, Mordechai, by knowing where his name was alluded to, and therefore he knew what's going to happen to him. He ended up hanging on a tree. Therefore he knew that he didn't have to be concerned about it, because he knew from the Torah itself what Haman's end would be. Okay, so Mordechai knew the story would end up fine in the end, and that's the important thing. Okay, so here, the Ben Ish Chai is telling us that it's not a frivolous question the Gemara is asking. The Gemara is asking a really important question. How do we know what's going to happen? How did Mordechai know what's going to happen to Haman in the end? He had a source in Torah that hints to it, so he knew everything would be okay. I also just want to very quickly, there's another connection that others mention. Why particularly also here with Haman and Hamin ha'etz and the connection to Adam HaRishon? What is the connection between Adam HaRishon, Adam, and Haman? Thematically, in terms of what was the issues in their lives that led to their problems? Okay, let's go through it again.
Yeah.
No, be careful. Be very careful. I knew exactly what you're thinking, but don't go there. Don't go there at all. That's not where I'm going. Wow. Yes, where's Boaz mentioned in the Torah? Anyway, what was the source of Adam HaRishon's sin? Not whom, what? Be very specific here.
Yeah.
An apple and Eve, in whichever order you.
No. What did God say to him? What did he say to both of them? Everything, you can have everything you want in the garden, but one thing.
Just Mordechai didn't bow down.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Hashem says to Adam HaRishon and Adam and Chava, you can have everything you want, but one thing you can't have. What's the one thing they wanted? What does that show? A lack of appreciation. You don't appreciate what you've got because you're always focusing on what you don't have. That's what led to them eating from the tree. What was the source of Haman's downfall? What does the Megillah say? Who was the only person? Everyone bowed down to him. Yeah, everyone bowed down to him except for Mordechai. What did he say? He said, everything I got, it doesn't mean anything to me until this one Jew bows down to me, because this one Jew won't bow down to me. He didn't appreciate what he had. He could only focus on what he didn't have. It's like the blank piece of paper with a dot on it. What do people focus on? The dot. You forget about everything else that's going around about outside it. That's again another thematic link. Why particularly Davka Chazal chose Hamin ha'etz as the connection between Haman and the Torah. Okay, let's turn over if you haven't already. Source number 8. Another Gemara. It's a continuation of the same Gemara. So having asked, where's Haman in the Torah? Let's ask another question. Where's Esther? Where's Esther in the Torah? Esther min Torah Menayan. Where do we find Esther in the Torah? Says the Gemara, is the posuk in Devarim that says, and this is in the Tochacha, where God is warning the Jewish people what happened to us if we fail to follow what He wants us to do. God says, "V'anochi haster astir." I will certainly hide myself from you. Yeah, and you'll look at the lettering. Yeah, astir, hastir, astir. Take out the yud, the second word. Aleph, samach, tav, resh. Esther. Again, very cute. Or is it? We'll come back to it in a moment. Very cute. So we found a word that means hidden, which also happens to spell the word Esther. Okay, we'll come back to it in a moment. Gemara goes on. We're doing well. We're on a roll here, says the Gemara. Okay, here's a good one for you. Mordechai. We're going to find Mordechai in the Torah. Yeah? We'll find it in a couple of weeks' time. Pashas Kitissa, which interestingly is often read, was always read in Adar, sometimes read very much closer to Purim than we will be this year. Okay. Says the Gemara, Mordechai min Torah min Island. Where do we find Mordechai in the Torah? The Pasuk says in Shemos, Ma'adoro. Ma'adoro, the Torah lists the different types of spices that were used, or was it here? It's called flowing frankincense. Is it myrrh? Myrrh. Flowing is one of the three. No, that's not something else. Different religion. Flowing myrrh. It's one of the things that was added into the ketoris, into the incense that was burnt on the altar. Right. It's one of the ingredients. Yes. Ma'adoro is this flowing myrrh. Mutargaminan, says the Gemara, and the Aramaic translation and commentary on the Torah calls it mira dechia. Yeah, and it's a word which we put them together. Mira dechia is Mordechai. Say it after a few whiskeys, it's definitely Mordechai, right? Definitely Mordechai. But here we have an allusion. It's not the best one. We're getting a bit stretched here now. We did very well with Haman. We did brilliantly with Esther. Mordechai is a bit of a schwitz, okay? But we'll go with it. We'll take it, okay? But I want to focus on Esther particularly, because this is a fascinating one. Says God, Va'anochi haster astir, I will certainly hide myself from you. Part of the warnings of the consequences of our failure to follow God is God says, okay, I'll hide myself from you. Almost, I'm just thinking about it out loud here, almost a bit of a parallel to what happens with Adam and Chava. They eat from the tree, and what do? They hide. And God says, Ayeka, where are you? First recorded game of hide and seek. But hold on a second. What does it mean? What does the Hashem? Where are you? You think God, they're hiding behind a tree? Oh, I can't see you. You ever thought of that? What's God playing along here? Ayeka, where are you? God is saying, I know where you are. Yeah, but you want to play a game. You want to pretend I can't see you. Okay, you want to fool yourselves, and unfortunately we all do this. Yeah, we all do this, and that's why the Torah records this. We think that there are times God can see what we're doing, but there are other times He just turns a blind eye. Oh, He can't see us. We can do whatever we like because God can't see us. Yeah, I'm not expecting anyone to admit to it, but yeah, there are all moments where we God delusion, let's call it. Yeah, that God can't see us. God said, yeah, "Okay, you want to play that game? I'll play that game. You don't want to pretend I can't see you? I'll pretend I can't see you." And that's what we're saying. That's what God says here. I'll hide as well. You want to pretend I can't see you? I'll pretend I can't see you. Let's develop this a bit further. Says Rashi on this Gemara, source number 9. So the Gemara asks, where do we find Esther in the Torah? Says Rashi straight away, Lamasa Esther. Not just Esther herself, but the whole event surrounding Esther. Haster Aster, B'mei Esther. Where do we find this idea of hiddenness? What we call Hester Panim, God hiding His face, so to speak. B'mei Esther. Where do we find it in the times of Esther? Yeah, Hester Panim. You'll find, what the Gemara is saying is, you want to know, God told us, God said in the Torah, in Devarim, there'll be a time in history where your waywardness will cause me to hide from you. Gemara asks, when is that? And that's what Gemara's question is. Esther minas Torah minayin doesn't mean where is Queen Esther in the Torah. It's saying where is there an example of God's hiddenness in Jewish history? Says the Gemara, it'll be in the times of Esther. Yeah? That's what Rashi is telling us. Esther panim masu saros rabos veros. And during that time, you'll find Soros. Yeah, we all don't need to translate that word, right? It came from Hebrew and found itself into Yiddish. Soros Rabos, great Soros, Veros, and negative things. Says the Gemara, Menayan, Legadolus, and then it goes on to Mordechai. Menayan, where do we find Mordechai? Legadolus Mordechai, the greatness of Mordechai. Madro, from the words that mean flowing myrrh. V'karei le rosh lebesamim v'sadikim v'anshe knesses hagadola. It just so happens that this myrrh was the finest of the spices, and Mordechai was one of the tzaddikim of his was the highest righteous man of his generation, and one of the men of the great assembly. Okay, so that's the Rashi. Let's look at source number 9. Go back to the Ben Ish Chai again. Esther min Torah minayin says the Ben Ish Chai. Nireli b'siyata deshmai, he says, it appears to me with God's help, gam bezeh kiven lahatzil es Mordechai al-Sadik, alav shalom. That the question here is also, remember what the Ben Ish Chai said when the Gemara asks, where do we find Haman in the Torah? Ben Ish Chai says, why did the Gemara ask that? In order to save Mordechai from the pain of wondering what's happening here. To know that the Torah has alluded to what will happen to this Haman in the end. He'll end up hanging from a tree. Don't worry about him. He's not a problem. Gemara now is, Ben Ish Chai is now saying, the Gemara also was concerned that Mordechai should understand what they were going through in their time. That this was almost pre-told by God when he said there will come a point in history when I will hide myself from you. Mordechai needs to know this is the time you're living in. In order to save him, it's Mordechai Sadik alav Hashem min ha'taluna sheyesh litnon alav al asher lo histes Esther lasnir bechedrik hadarim. Says Ben Ish Chai something fascinating. He says Mordechai was worried, or could have been worried, that his actions, what he did by pushing Esther forward, allowing her to be taken into the king's palace, was not right. Says the Gemara. So it says Ben Ish Chai, the Gemara is reassuring Mordechai he did the right thing, because he says he could have hidden her away in order that she wasn't then taken into the palace to be a prospective queen. So on the second line it says, where do you know that he did the right thing by not hiding her away and secluding her in, like, the inner Chadrei Chadarim means in the inner rooms. So Yada Ba Achashverosh v'Chenula, in order that Achashverosh should know about her and take her to him. U'lachein shal makom shema b'Torah, and therefore he asks, the Gemara asks on his behalf, where we find her name in the Torah. Third line, Kedei shemeshamem yivadei ma yeh b'sofa, because again, knowing where the name is will tell us what the end of the story will be for her. Uperish Shama, and therefore it tells us that her name, Nirmas b'pasuk Hester Astir, is alluded to in the verse in Devarim, I will surely hide my face. Mashma, which implies, Shetimsa Esther bezman shistchaim davar zeh shel hasteres panim, that Esther will find her place, that Esther's time is Davka during a time of Hester Panim. Esther's moment to shine is specifically during a moment where God appears to be hiding from the Jewish people. When is that? During the Purim story. Yeah, as we know, God's name is not mentioned in the Megillah at all. It appears that God is washed his hands of us. We're on our own. Middle of the fourth line, Al-Kain, Mikan Muchach Shter Hatzlala Yisrael Bizman Hester Panim. And therefore it was this proved, gave him the evidence to know that the salvation for the Jewish people will come in this time of Hester Panim, of God hiding himself, Alidei Esther, through Esther. The Maikar Mashmalan, Shetieh Esther might sue Ba'usu Zman, because otherwise, how else do we know that Esther was meant to be at this moment? Imlo le'inyan shtei revach v'hatzalah, as Mordechai says to her, if you don't do it now, after you sheikh, if you say to yourself, not me. Remember, she says, I can't go. He says to her something really, really powerful. If you don't go, revach v'hatzalah, savior and salvation will come from somewhere else. If not you, someone else. Your moment in history is going to be lost. And that's what she says. Okay, I'll go. And if I'm lost, I'm lost. But this is my moment. She realizes she has to go. And this is what the Gemara is telling us. Aliyada, and it comes to her. End of the final line. Al Kain lo etzniya legamri. Therefore, he didn't hide her completely. Rather, he opened things up in order that she could be taken leves hamalchus to the king's palace. In order that she should be in the right place to bring about the salvation through her when it was necessary. Again, and the irony is a little bit like Moshe Rabbeinu. Yeah, what was Pharaoh's plan? Pharaoh had seen his astrologers had told him that a boy will be born into the Jewish people who will cause him a lot of problems. What does he say? Throw all the boys into the river. Who was the one boy who ends up saving the Jewish people from Pharaoh? The very boy, it's not a trick question, the very boy who was brought up in the royal palace. Same thing here. The one person who ends up saving the Jewish people is the one who actually is brought into the royal palace. Brilliant irony. Yeah. Okay. So again, the Ben Ish Chai is telling us that the Gemara is not just a bit of Purim Torah. There's a serious message here that Mordechai needed to know that what he was doing was right, and this was what needed to be done. Let's go a bit further. Source number 11. Any sort of questions or anything? Comments? Feel free just to. I've meant to say at the beginning. It's not meant to be a dialogue. It's meant to be a dialogue. No, it's not meant to be a monologue. I forget the two. Yeah, it's meant to be a conversation. Right? Okay, feel free to jump in whenever. So source number 11. The Be'er Mayim Chaim. We're going to get a bit Chassidish here a little bit. Okay. Says the Be'er Mayim Chaim. He says the Al-Kain Amar. So again, we look at the Gemara. The Gemara says, Esther min HaTorah min 9 Shneimah. The Pasuk says, V'anachi haste panai bayom. Second line. Uluch says the Be'er Mayim Chaim says, Lo noda perish devarehem bezeh lo hashalav lo tshuva. It says the Be'er Mayim Chaim. He says, I don't understand the question. I don't understand the answer. The question was, where do we find Esther in the Torah? I don't understand why it's asking that question. And the answer is, in this verse, I'll surely hide my face. I don't understand that's the answer. And he says, the truth is, the question actually is, where do we know that there are times where God performs miracles in a hidden way? Meaning, through natural means. Where do we know that? Where do we know that miracles are happening all the time, even though we can't see them? That's an even more fundamental question than asking where's Esther in the Torah, right? You understand the question? Yeah. The middle of the third line. Esther. Where do we know that these miracles happen? Where people can't see them, like the miracle of Esther, where God, it appears, is not involved. V'amru, and they say, V'anochi aster panai. And the Gemara answers with the verse we just saw, that I will surely hide my face, etc. On to the fourth line. Zehu hesteres panim meosoi. This is the idea of hester panim, of God's hidden face. And this is a principle we have throughout Jewish literature, that there are times in Jewish history where it appears God hides his face from us, meaning we can't see him. We're not aware of his active involvement in the denouement of events, of history. Middle of the fourth line, even though he's doing miracles, and how do we know that even he's doing miracles that aren't revealed to the eye? Rather, he hides them in the natural order of the world. To the extent where the wicked people say, that's not God, that didn't come from God. Yeah, people will say, oh, that's just a coincidence. Yeah, it just happened. Yeah, and the insurance companies, they always choose when they want to say it, right? Yeah, when they don't want to pay out, they say it's an act of God. Yeah, and all other times, no, of course, we don't believe in God. Right? So why is it there are times where God is, what he's saying here is this, God is constantly performing miracles on our behalf. Sometimes we see them, sometimes we don't. Why is it there are times we don't see them? Because of our transgressions. We create a barrier between us and God, but we can't see them clearly. We're not in tune. It's like, you don't have this anymore, but obviously we need to tune the radios, right? In between the stations, there's that fuzzy noise, right? Yeah, a lot of the time we're just hearing the fuzz because we've not tuned in. We're not on the right frequency to hear God. We don't deserve it. We don't deserve to see God's hand openly at work. And on to the next line, we just skip a little bit further. Those who have true faith in God know, little by little, that hashgacha, that God's divine providence, truthfully in our hearts, we know we will not fall into that trap. As roeh be'einav ki zeh vaday siba me'es Hashem. Rather, we see with our own eyes that everything that happens is caused by God. Lo hashies amo Yisrael, to save his people, the Jewish people. Rakshinista b'teva, rather it's hidden in nature. V'loi zeh bilvad shiron zos b'neis nifla k'mod b'neis Esther k'ukodomeh. And not that alone, only alone do we see that it's a nes nifla, it's a wondrous miracle, like the miracles of Esther and anything similar. These happen b'chol yom vayom. Rather, every single day, Shemabitzin al kol teva ha'ulam vet asher na'aseh boi roin ha'flagos nasav yisbarach she'en ha'mishir v'eirech v'na'asim v'chol yom v'chol eis v'chol shav v'raga. Basically, what he's saying is that if you can open your eyes to it, if you realize you have true emunah, you will see it. You'll see even the hidden miracles. You'll see, even in the natural events. Even when you miss the bus, you realize, Yad Hashem, it's God's hand. Maradona, right? You could see that's a miracle as well. It was meant to be. There was a reason for it. It's not a coincidence. Yeah. And that's just the next paragraph. As roin b'chush mamash ki ein mikra ba'olam. He says another thing. He says, when you have that perspective, when you're able to discern God's miracles all the time, even what appear to be natural ones, then nothing is considered to be mikra. It means by chance. There's nothing happens by chance in this world. Everything is planned. Everything has a cause. Everything has a reason and a purpose. We might not understand it. We may not be able to recognize it or realize it, but we need to know that is the case. We won't read the rest of the paragraph. That's basically what he's saying. The Hester Panim is almost a self-inflicted situation to be in. That God hiding himself, like coming back to Adam Arishon, right? When they hid themselves, they couldn't see God. They pretended they couldn't see God. God said, okay, you want to pretend? I'll pretend with you. But the truth is you realize there is no hiding from God, and we also realize that God never hides. Yeah, He sometimes wraps things up in what appears to be natural events, but there's no such thing as chance, no thing as just coincidence. Everything emanates ultimately from God for a reason. Okay.
Which sort of makes sense.
Oh, good.
Only because everything happens, we have free will and we make things happen for ourselves and things happen in the world. But when we see something that looks like a miracle, we can't just say, well, it's a miracle and just discount everything else as not being a miracle. The grass grows, the sky is blue, the whatever.
Yeah.
But we do. We naturally do.
Right.
That's why presumably it's distinguishing between the times when God Hashem is hidden and the times when Hashem isn't hidden. Is that there's no difference. It's just a different way of expressing perception of it.
Yeah. I think someone once said, nature is just a miracle that happens on a daily basis.
Yeah.
It's no less, grass growing, the sun coming up. It's no less miraculous, but we take it for granted. Part of the human condition is something that you just take for granted. You don't see the danger is. I'm saying you don't. The danger is you lose sight of the miraculous nature of it. Yeah? Okay.
But if everything's a miracle, what's a real miracle then? You can't say that every single thing that happens every day, like grass growing, which is lovely, how can you can't say that, because a miracle is something extra special happening maybe at the right time, like the Red Sea parting. That's a miracle. It happened. I don't think you could say that everything's a miracle because there's so many horrible things.
I'm opening it up.
I said, as opposed to the sun coming up at night time instead of the day. As in it comes up every day. Maybe that is a miracle. Maybe.
No, I don't think it's the real meaning of a miracle to me.
Well, then maybe we need to redefine it and see everything as a bit more.
No, it can't be, because then it wouldn't be a real miracle, would it? If everything that happens every day is a miracle, well, then what is a real miracle? No, I don't agree.
We'll come back to the definition though. That nature is a miracle that happens on a daily basis.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a lovely thing.
So we do agree.
Not all of nature happening every day is good, is it? They have forest fires. Animals get killed in forests. To me, that isn't a miracle every day.
Okay, you're right. Okay, so I think we're almost conflating terms here. But when we say miracle, what we just said here with the Be'er Marachim is that the everything that happens has a reason, has a cause, has a source. God is the reason, the cause, the source, all of that. The big stuff, the unusual events, which we'll call more miracles, and the daily occurrences, which we'll call nature. Are we comfortable with that?
Okay.
Don't have to be.
They're all still the hand of God. They're all still the hand of God, and if you want to call it miracle or something else.
I suppose there's no, when it comes to miracles, I suppose there's no grades of miracles. So there's no like grade 1 and like a grade 10 miracle.
Oh,
like a
for
big,
me, a miracle is what I think of as a miracle, as something extra special that happens as a miracle that helps someone or cures someone. Maybe you could say that a surgeon performing life-saving operation is a miracle. If the person survives and is good. I can't say that every day there may be a miracle happening, but not everyday events like the sun coming up, because Hashem made the world to work like that.
Haven't you ever been out maybe for a walk on a day when the sun's out, the sky's blue, it may be cold and crisp, and you have this overwhelming feeling that it's good to be alive? That's a miracle.
Yes.
But you
Well,
suddenly
you know,
appreciate
Isn't that your
everything
own
in your eyes.
personal miracle?
No.
Yeah, I think it is.
Childbirth.
What? I'm not saying there aren't miracles. I'm just saying I don't.
There's miracles and miracles.
Miracles, yeah. Okay, so I think I tried. Sorry, go on.
Okay, so let's say you broke your leg, right? Before you broke your leg, every time you got up and walked wasn't a miracle. But afterwards, once it was healed, every time you got up and walked was suddenly a miracle. What happened in between?
But you
Your
can't
disperception.
say that when other people are in wheelchairs. You know, that is not what I would say is a miracle. Just getting up and not breaking my leg.
No, I didn't say that. I said once it was hit. I said, let's say you broke your leg. So the times before it was broken, you didn't get up every day and think, I can walk, this is amazing. But once it was healed, all the times after you got up and walked, you probably would be thinking, this is a miracle, I can walk now.
You're appreciating all that.
Yes.
Right. So
Yeah,
what is
that's
nothing's
a different
changed.
thing. That's a different thing.
Of what you have and what you-
Appreciating.
yeah.
Every
It's
day I'm
recognition.
grateful for what I have and what I can do. And yes, if it's lovely weather, I'm grateful for every blessing I have. But that is different from miracle.
One's concept of the word miracle means it's something extraordinary,
Yeah.
special,
Yes.
rather than just ordinary.
Yeah. And then, yeah, Julian, we say a nace is malam minateva. It's extra extraordinary. It comes outside of nature. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what we're trying to say is there are different grades of miracle, right? There are the one-offs, the splitting of the Red Sea, those big events. But at the same time, there's things going on a regular basis. I think we should need to look at that next paragraph, and I thought we'd get away without looking at it, but we have to look at that next paragraph then, because I think that helps us. So the second paragraph in source 11. Yeah, everyone got it? Sorry.
Yeah.
It says, he says, literally have to say, there's no such thing as chance in the world. I should to say that, that just happened. Rather, we know and believe that everything comes from Hashem. Call it miracle, don't call it miracle. Call it nature, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, it all comes from God. And God is the one who saves the Jewish people from all their pain constantly, with his power, with his great power and his mercy and his compassion. However, sometimes he hides that in natural events, in normal events. Yeah? And on this we say the cause of the cause. But we are, with our limited perspective, we see the result, but we discount the cause to a chance. Yeah, does that make sense? That came to save us. The truth is, he is the cause of all causes. And he is the one who is miraculously causing his miracles for everybody, always, constantly, b'toch hateva, within nature. Within the natural order of the world, God is constantly moving things around in order that the bigger picture works out the way he wants it to work out. Yeah? Does that make sense? Excellent. If not, say. I'm fine with it. It's the Bema I'm fine. You're not attacking me. I'm fine. You can say what you like.
I'm not arguing with a rabbi.
That's what they do best.
What was that?
You're not a rabbi.
It must be a miracle. Who had never happened? I really believe in miracles now.
I have a problem.
Yeah.
Rabbi, I have a problem.
That's not tomorrow night, Stephen, not tonight. Anyway, carry on.
That's fine until things go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Go on.
Okay, the biggest example is Holocaust,
Mm-hmm.
right? The natural world was turned upside down, and somebody who's supposed to be controlling it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But the outcome was the state of Israel.
That's 6 million.
Okay, so I'm not in any way trying to compare or downplay the Holocaust, but I think that's what we're touching on tonight. We're touching on the story of Mordechai and Esther had the potential to be the Holocaust of its time. And the people at that time must have said, "Where's God?" And God says, "Vanochi aste. I'm working things around. You can't see me. Yes, I'm involved." Okay? Now,
That was fine then, but what about now?
But then, see, we're reading the Purim story over half an hour, or how long the reader takes to say it. And we're seeing
17 minutes.
Right, and we're seeing the Holocaust in time. But that the Purim story didn't happen over 2 weeks. It wasn't a 2 weeks. So that's why they were saying, "Where is God?" And we're saying, well, God was hidden. Maybe in 50, 100 years' time, people will be saying, like we say about Mitzrayim, where was God when we were in Egypt? We're now looking back and seeing it as a story, whereas the Holocaust, we're still in that
really good point.
era.
Really good point. Yeah, really good point.
So we can't answer it.
And can we go back to the first two halachas we looked at? What does the Shulchan Aruch say? HaKoros Megillah Melafreya Lo Yatsa. If you read the Megillah in the wrong order, if you fall asleep during the Megillah, you've not fulfilled your obligation. Why? Because it won't make sense. Yeah? If you read the chapter where the king wakes up at night and reads the book, but you read that before Mordechai hears Bigtan and Teresh, his plot, it's not going to make any sense. If you read that Esther is installed in queen before Vashti is put to death, not going to make any sense. Yeah? You read it in the wrong order, it's not going to make any sense. What's going on here? It just doesn't make sense. Now, that's not specific to the Megillah, but the Megillah is being used as dogma, it's being used as an example of how look at events in history or look at the present day. Yeah? It doesn't make sense. And the beautiful analogy we can use, there are two analogies always I think are really powerful. You take a tapestry. If you're looking at a tapestry from the back, it's just a jumble of what they call threads, right? It makes no sense. But when you turn it over, it's a beautiful picture. If you're standing in a valley, and you see the events in the valley, you have a very limited perspective. Compared to that person standing on top of the mountain looking down, completely different perspective. Yeah, we view that's what I think the Bear Mind I'm trying to tell us, that it's all about perspective. The way you look at it. Yeah. Yes, we can't see God. Yes, we don't know what's going on. It doesn't seem to make any sense. But we need to know the story of the Megillah is telling us something really, really powerful. God is there all the time. Everything happens for a reason. We may not understand the reason. It may make no sense to us. But don't think God's abandoned you just because you can't see him. Don't think that God is not engineering situations, creating these little miracles, natural miracles, these little pieces moving around the chessboard. Don't think that he's not doing any of that because you can't see it. Yeah. It's very much happening. Very much happening.
Or because you can't notice it.
Yeah. Let's look at a couple more sources. Source number 12. So we go back. Basically now, I bring this, 4 sources here from some of the classical commentaries, medieval commentaries on the Torah, on that verse in Devarim, Va'anochi aste panai, that God says, "I will surely hide my face from you." What does that mean? It says Rashi, source number 12 at the bottom of the page, and I will hide my face from them as though I do not see their distress. Really important word in there in Rashi. Not that I don't see their distress, as though. It would appear as if I can't see their distress. But of course I can. That's the first thing. turn over. The Sforno. After they will have fallen under the control of the Gentile nations, who will abuse them and oppress them, I will ignore my natural sense of pity and make believe as if I were unaware of their plight.
Why then?
Because we're not deserving. Yeah? We've got to take some responsibility here. The Jews in the time of Mordechai and Esther weren't really deserving of being saved. They didn't deserve a massive miracle like the Jewish people did at the times of Pharaoh. But there was still a miracle. It was hidden in nature. It was hidden in all the little things that happened, all the little coincidences. Vashti just wouldn't come to the feast. Mordechai overheard the big time on Teresh. The king just couldn't sleep. Yeah, all these little coincidences, said the Be'er Malchaim, they're not coincidences. There's God's hand at work here. You can't see it, but know it's there. God's acting as if we can't. He turns a blind eye to us, but he's not. Why? And why is it like that? Because that causes us to question: why can't I see God? Why is God hidden himself from me? Like Adam Arishon and Chava. God played along with it so that they understood. Of course, God can see us. Once you get over that stupidity, you realize there's no hiding from God. I've caused the distance. God's not gone anywhere. I've turned my back. That's why I can't see him. Let's look at Chizkuni. I will hide my face from them. This is evidence of God's fondness of the Jewish people. He's acting like a father who is forced to discipline his son, cannot bring himself to watch the pain he is inflicting on them. Really powerful imagery here. And then source 15, the Ibn Ezra, I shall utterly conceal in the sense that if they call me, I will not answer. The analogy is to a man who cannot be seen, so no one knows what he is going to do. The Hebrew language repeats a verb here to express emphasis or intensification, as the grammarians will well know, meaning astir. It's almost a reflexive verb. So some of the medieval commentators there just add in a little nuance there that's very, very powerful. That God is saying, you might not think that I care, but actually you should realize I care more than you can ever understand. And this is proof of it. That I'm doing things for you even though you're not deserving of it, and even though you can't see it. Let's look at a couple more sources, yeah? Let's look at source number 16, the Baal Shem Tov. I'm going to see whether we can summarize it or we read it together. Okay, let's read a little bit and we'll summarize a bit more. Are we okay? We're good?
Yeah.
Okay. He says, essentially this is a really surprising verse. How is it possible that God could hide himself from the Jewish people? Chalila. How could it be? How could we ever exist? Someone at the door. How could we ever exist? Did we wake him?
No, it's just, these caterers, they just let themselves in now and again. Yeah, well.
Just because I thought I'm thinking things, I'm going mad.
Did he have a nightmare?
Sorry?
Was he having a nightmare?
No, he wanted to tell us he was here before
Oh,
I
okay.
started opening everything.
Okay.
Crept in.
We'll take orders for waffles, yeah?
Yeah.
Kizeh, middle of the second line. Kizeh kol cheosam. Our whole life force is our connection to God. How can it be that God even turned himself from us? This I bet I can summarize. So the Baal Shem Tov explains this idea of God hiding himself from us with a moshel, with an analogy. It's always of a king, right? Always a king and his son, right? Yeah, there's a king. For whatever reason, he creates by way of illusion. I'm confused now. Illusion. By way of illusion, what appears to be barriers and walls that are surrounding the palace. So the son thinks there's no way he can get to see his father. He can't get to the palace because it's too heavily protected. But it's all smokes and mirrors. Right? They're not really there. Yeah. All the time the son thinks that there are these barriers for him to be able to get to his father, he's never going to attempt it. Only when he comes to realization, which actually this is merely a mirage. this is not real? Does he make the effort to go in? It says crosses rivers and goes through fire, etc., in order to get to God. Says the Baal Shem Tov, this is obviously, the king is God and we are his child, that somehow we've created in our own minds this illusion that God is distant from us. But it's in our minds. It's not a reality. God never abandons us, like a parent never abandons their child. Right? It's the child that creates the distance from the parent by their choices. The parent's always there, willing, ready and willing and wanting the child to come back to them. But the child has to make that step. And we have to make that effort. And then you break down the barriers. And you see the way I've put it in bold. And even if, occasionally the king hides, is hidden. It's not to distance ourselves from him, but it's for to awaken us. Yeah? So we're not always there. Yeah, but why? Not as some sort of punishment. Again, I haven't got time to go into it, but punishment is not a Jewish concept. Right? Guilt is, punishment isn't. Right? Yeah, it's about consequences. You do something, and there's a consequence to it. Yeah, you overeat, you feel ill. That's not a punishment. That's a consequence. You do something that distances you from God. That's not a punishment when you're distant, when you can't see God. It's a consequence. You run too far in the distance, and you look back, you can't see them. That's not you're being punished for running too far. It's just that natural. That's the consequence. And that is alluded to us. God is telling us that will happen in history. I'm not hiding myself from you. But you've caused yourself to be hidden from me, so to speak. But I've given you a heart to understand. When you're able to understand it, you'll know that I've not hidden myself from you. I'm always here. Does that make sense? Really beautiful idea. And so the Baal Shem Tov is telling us that posuk is a very powerful lesson to us, that God is always there, waiting, willing and waiting for us. Let's bring it back to the Megillah a little bit, and maybe finish off by trying to answer our original questions. First, I want to share with you a beautiful idea. You can take this and leave it however you want to. But again, this idea of God, the hiddenness within the Megillah. Firstly, the word Megillah itself is connected to the word Megillah, meaning to be revealed. Nigleh means to be revealed. Right? The Megillah, we unroll the Megillah in order to reveal the story that's hidden within it. The Maharal says, that's why the Maharal says that someone who misses even a single word in the Megillah has not fulfilled the mitzvah. I'll show you something amazing though. In the 1950s, there was a Rav called Rav Michal Dov Weissmandel. He was known as the father of Torah codes. Do you remember Torah codes? Everyone got very excited about 25 years ago. Yeah, when those computers were still bigger than this room, right? Yeah. Torah codes have been around forever, right? The Vilna Gaon, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, when the Pasuk says, ayin tachas ayin, that's a very quick one. The Torah says an eye for an eye. We know for sure that doesn't mean literally. Yeah, the Vilna Gaon said that's a Torah code because it means an eye beneath an eye. Tachas means under, right? Eye and under eye. The Vilna Gaon says take the letters that come under each of the letters ayin nun, ayin yud nun. It spells the word kesef. Kesef is money. We know, says the Vilna Gaon, the Torah was encoding in there for us the fact that when we say an eye for an eye, we mean the monetary value for an eye is what you pay. So Torah codes have been around forever. Right? In every generation, we found different ways of revealing them. In the 1950s, Rav Michal Dov Weissmandel had a Torah code for the Megillah. Here's a bit of trivia for you. How many letters are there in the Megillah? 12,196. I didn't count. He counted. Right? 12,196. He says the following. If you take the first aleph you find in Torah, which is probably in the first word in the Torah, Bereshit, and you count 12,196 letters from it, you get to the letter Samach. Then count another 12,196 letters. Very good. Another 12,000. Reish. Intervals of 12,196 the complete letter count of the Megillah, in the Torah you find Esther's name. Now you should be asking more about Mordechai. Okay? He was asked that. He took him a year to come up with the next answer. Mordechai, let's go back to where did the Gemara say you find the word Mordechai in the Torah? In the Pasuk Madror, in the Pasuk in Shemos, in Kitissa, Madror, the flowing myrrh. He says, count from the mem of Madror, 12,196 letters. What letter do you think you get? Or Reish. Keep going. You spell out the word Mordechai. Take it or leave it.
It's a bit like gematria, but
Yes,
worse.
I think of the number you first.
Okay. Wow, not believers yet. Okay, fine. Okay. No wonder God's hiding from us. Anyway, okay, let's return, and then we'll wrap up. Let's return to sources. Return to source 1 and 5. What did the halakha say? If you read the Megillah L'Mafreya out of order, retroactively, you've not fulfilled your mitzvah. If you're listening to the Megillah and you doze off and you miss something, you've not fulfilled the mitzvah. Why? Because it won't make any sense. Yeah. Because the Megillah is the revelation of knowledge that God is constantly at work performing miracles, big and small. Sometimes in natural order, sometimes outside of it, but always working for us. Therefore, you read the Megillah in the wrong order, you're going to miss the whole main point of the Megillah, which is this concept of understanding Hester Panim. What does it mean that God is hidden? And we've seen a few explanations of that. But if you haven't read it in the right order, if you read the end of the story read the end of the story. I was going to say, that's what Eva always does. She always reads the end of a book before the beginning of it. I don't know why, but you can't do that with the Megillah. Read the end of the Megillah before the beginning, you've missed the whole point. Oh, it's very nice. Very nice to get to the end, and it's all happy, but you would not have revealed the deep message which is in the Megillah, which doesn't seem to make any sense. It appears to be a stream of ongoing coincidences with God not in it at all, not in the picture at all. Similarly, if you fall asleep during hearing the Megillah, you're going to miss the whole point of the Megillah, which is this message. So let's return to our original question, which I planted right at the outset. Our two children, Purim and Pesach. Which one is the most mature?
Pesach.
Still Pesach? Excellent.
Pesach is a visible mitzvah.
Mm-hmm.
You see what happens. Bnei Israel come out of Mitzrayim and they cross the Red Sea. Boom, massive miracle. Purim, again, a bit like Yael said, you if you look at one particular part of it, you can't see anything that has any consequence until you've read the whole story. So you've got to be mature.
One day, and Pesach is 8.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got Yom Tov days in it. Purim hasn't. You can go to school, you can go to work, It's,
You can eat bread as well.
Pardon?
You can eat bread as well.
I just think that Pesach is a much more heavy brow one, if you want to use that word, or mature one then.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think the message is really, Pesach is, if you want, maybe as David was saying, it's simpler because it's obvious. You can see the miracles. We recount all the miracles that Hashem did in getting the Exodus. Whereas here you actually have to work at it a bit more to actually get to understand that this was just as big a miracle, if not bigger, and that it doesn't. It's not sort of spelled out for you. You need to actually pay attention. You need to follow it all to get the message.
Yep.
So that's where.
I like that. Thank you. Anyone else?
So it's Purim, is it?
Well, let's work through it. Do you know? We don't have to agree. There's no right or wrong. I mean, it's no right or wrong. It's just a suggestion. Let's go through it, though. Let's go through it. Maybe I haven't explained it right. What I mean is, when I mean mature, I mean philosophically deeper. Let's go through it. Pesach. Oh, right. Let's go through it. Let's go to Pesach first. When does Pesach occur? Not a trick question. In Nisan. Nisan is the first month of the year. It's the beginning of the year. It's the beginning of the year. At what point in Jewish history did was Pesach? Again, not a trick question. Just after the Exodus from Mitzrayim, where were we as a people? At the beginning. We were a nation, right? We were just born at being Abdei Pharaoh to being Abdei Hashem, from being servants, being slaves over 400 years to becoming free people. Yeah, we almost missed it, right? We've dropped to the 49th level of Tumah of impurity. We nearly missed the boat. So you see, it's the beginning, the start of us being Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, the Bnei Yisrael. And that is why at that point, what did we need? Open miracles. Nes Nigla, it's called, open miracles. We had to see God's hand. Yeah, we had to have the 10 plagues. We had to have the splitting of the sea. We had to have the manna. We had to have the well. We had to do all of it. We had to be spoon-fed with spirituality. We had to see God so clearly it was impossible not to know God existed. And what's the proof of that? What's the proof that that's actually a weaker type of faith than not seeing God? Well, but firstly, Pharaoh. You'll have to remind yourselves, we're going to get there in 4 weeks' time, you'll read it all, right? What happens every time there's a plague? Pharaoh says, oh, please ask your God, the God, to take away this plague. What happens as soon as the plague goes away? I don't know who your God is. Who's this God you're talking about? I've never heard of this God. Faith based on miracles is a very weak faith. While the miracle is there, when you can see God, great. When you can't see God, it's all over. The Jewish people as well don't think we were any better. We saw all those things we saw in Egypt. And yet, every 5 minutes, we complained about this, we complained about that. Yeah, we wanted to go back to Egypt because it's better to die in Egypt than it is die in the desert. Why? Because our faith was so weak at that moment. Because we were so young, we were immature. Because our faith was based on seeing God openly. And that's not it's not a strong basis for faith. Let's compare it to Purim. When does Purim happen? What month? Adar. The end of the year. Right at the end of a whole year when we've celebrated all of the Chagim. Finally, we have Purim. Hashem's name not in the Megillah. There are a set of coincidences. But yet we know it's called Nes Nista. There are hidden miracles going on. Purim, as we said itself, the name means something completely by chance, a lottery. But Adar means Aleph Dar, dwelling with the Aleph, with the Aluf, with God himself. Knowing that even though we can't see him, he's there. So remember, what they call it, separation anxiety, young children. Yeah, I'm not psychologist. This is like kitchen sink psychology here. But why did children who have issues passing from their parents? What's the issue at stake? They think their parents are never going to come back. Insecurity. They think the parents they can't see their parents. They think their parents are never going to come back. Yeah. Once they obviously grow and they're reassured, and their parent does come back, they realize even though I can't see my parents, I know they're still there and they will come back to me. This is what Purim is. When we can't see God, then we know he's there. If we open our eyes, if we realize that this hiddenness is not God hiding himself, it's merely the barriers we've created that create the illusion that God is not there. But if we open our eyes to it, we can see that the more miraculous are those miracles which are actually hidden within nature itself. And if you want final proof that Purim is the most mature festival out of all of them, despite the fact that we eat and we drink and we everything's upside down and we dress up, Look at the final source number 17. Gave me a famous Gemara. Famous Gemara. Anybody want a get-out clause for having to keep mitzvahs? It's this Gemara. Because we know when the Torah recounts how when the Jewish people received the Torah at Mount Sinai, the Torah tells us they stood underneath the mountain. Says the Gemara, what do you mean underneath the mountain? The Gemara says God took the mountain, inverted it over the Jewish people's heads and says, if you accept the Torah, great. If not, Yiskadal v'Yiskadash. This is it. Good night. Says the Gemara, did they accept the Torah freely then? If someone's holding a mountain over your head and says, are you going to accept it? What are you going to say? Let me think of it. Let me get back to you on that one. Anyone going to say no? No. We're coerced into it. We were forced into it. That you could claim. And there's plenty of Mepharshim explain why it had to be by force, it couldn't be by chance, but that's another discussion. Essentially, the Gemara asks the question, therefore it's a valid question. It would appear that the Torah isn't binding, because if you're forced into a contract against your will, that's an invalid contract. That's what we had. The Torah was the covenant that we have between God through the Torah. The Torah is the ksuba, right? Is the marriage document. Is invalid because you can't force someone to marry you against their will. What does the Gemara answer? You may be right. However, there was a time in Jewish history when the people freely accepted the Torah themselves. When was that? Not Pesach. When was it? Purim. Says the Gemara. Look, it says here. Kimu v'kiblu ayudim. Says in the Megillah, the Jewish people kimu. They established. They kept. Kiblu. They accepted upon themselves. Says the Gemara. It was like almost until night. It was on condition. It stretched from the time of Sinai to that point. From that point on forward, when the Jews of the time of Mordechai and Esther freely accepted the Torah upon themselves, in a time when there was no open miracles, God wasn't there, wasn't holding a mountain over their head, hadn't appeared to them in the sound and light show that they did at Har Sinai, and they accepted the Torah, then it becomes binding on all generations. Because Torah accepted when it's not based on miracles, seeing God openly, is the most powerful acceptance of all. Faith based on open miracles is weak. Emunah is knowing God exists even when we can't see him. And that's why Purim is the greatest simcha that we have. Because it's an acknowledgement that God is always with us, not only even when we can't see him, but because we can't see him. We know from the fact that we can't see him that he is always with us, because he promised us that. Va'anochi aster aster. I will certainly be hidden from you. And at that time, you will know that I'm not hidden from you. Does that make sense? Any other observations, comments, disagreements?
This has nothing to do with this, but when you said that everyone's end was predicted in the Torah, what was Moshe's then?